good morning, everyone. My name is Tracy Laliberty, and I am the Executive Director for the Center for Advanced Studies in Child Welfare, and we are located in the School of Social Work at the University of Minnesota. And I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar. We would like to thank you for joining us, of course, and this is the third and final webinar in our 2020 summer series. The Center for Advanced Studies in Child Welfare and the Hennepin County Attorney's Office have an ongoing partnership where we bring training opportunities to education and child welfare professionals who work with kids and families around issues of chronic absenteeism. Typically, we meet and we gather together in person, and it's a wonderful exchange of interdisciplinary work and ideas and problem solving. And this year, we get the opportunity to do things a little bit differently, thank you to COVID. So we've had this 2020 summer series, which has been a three-part series. And we've been able to really reach actually a lot more people than we otherwise would have. We've had over 200 people register for each of the three webinars. And today we have over 270 people registered for today's session. So we're very excited about that and really hopeful that it's been helpful for people to be able to hear how people are problem solving and doing some of their work. I'd like to thank the staff that have worked so hard to make this possible, especially in a quick turnaround and in a new venue. Really thanking Linda Ritchie at the Hennepin County Attorney's Office and Karina Berry and Nora Lee from the Center for Advanced Studies in Child Welfare. I want to let people know that as we ask questions, people can ask questions and of the speakers as we go. We will also be saving the chat. So if people want to put questions in the chat, we'll be moderating that, and we will also be saving that. If we don't get to all the questions, we will work with our speakers to try to get answers and get that back out to people. So at this time, I'd like to ask Lori Whittier from the Hennepin County Attorney's Office to say a few words.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Tracy. I'm Lori Whittier. I'm the managing attorney of the Child Protection Division in the Hennepin County Attorney's Office, which is where our Be at School program sits. On behalf of Hennepin County Attorney Mike Freeman, I would also like to welcome you all to the annual conference, and certainly to thank the staff that have put together another great series of webinars. Every year, I'm amazed at the topics and the discussions and how much information we're able to share and learn from each other. So thank you for that. Just a little background, our Be at School program is a program that is dedicated to addressing school engagement and attendance issues for kids. So as everyone, I'm sure, has been turned around with the spring and distance learning and the pandemic, it seems we are moving into fall with still a lot of uncertainty. So I hope you all are able to find today's discussion as an opportunity to think about ways of how you can partner in your role in supporting students. And I hope you get a lot out of the discussion. So thank you again. Enjoy.
Thank you, Lori. We have two speakers today. We've been very fortunate to connect with Commissioner Ricker's office, and the commissioner is planning to join us to say a few words to open today, and I'm not sure if she's online yet. I haven't seen her.
I'm here.
Oh, there she is.
She's there.
Great. Well, you know, I'm on multiple screens here, so I'm so glad you just popped up here as a speaker. So if I'm just going to turn it right over to you, and you can say a few words to open us up, Commissioner.
Sure thing. Thank you so much. Thank you, Tracy, for pulling this together and the invitation for me to join all of you today, to just be among all of you and know that we share so many of our goals, our hopes and dreams for our students across Minnesota, and for me to also just be able to hang out during the session to just hear some of the work you are doing and some of the work you're committed to. As we've already stated, we've always known that keeping our students engaged in their lessons or their in-person or distance learning classrooms is the best way for them to learn, that engagement is key. We know that for some students, though, attendance is not always consistent. However, instead of punishing students for poor attendance or pursuing truancy actions, we also know we need to go deeper than that. We need to get to the root causes of why students are missing school so that we as educators, supporting agencies, community members, families, we can all help them focus on their learning. That's why last spring, I asked lawmakers to eliminate truancy actions in the midst of the unprecedented challenges for our students and families and schools that they faced during emergency distance learning. And the legislation came to fruition. Legislators recognized what you and I know, and that is the causes of student attendance issues are often likely not in the student's control or even the family's control. Rather than punishing students and families, we need to ask, what is causing students to miss school? Is it the school climate? Does a student not feel welcomed? Are they being bullied? Do they not feel safe? Is it a chronic health condition? Is there something else going on? Is a family member sick? Does a student need to care for younger children while a parent is working? Is the student struggling with their own mental health? Do they need transportation or do they need the technology to go to school? These were questions educators were asking themselves last spring over and over that they carried from their traditional settings into their distance learning setting as, again, they were trying to get to that engagement, which we know is key. So these barriers and challenges were not new to distance learning, but we certainly saw them amplified during distance learning. And so we need to address those root causes of student attendance issues because we know their future depends on it. Consistent attendance is an important indicator of student engagement and school climate and how well they do academically into the future. Students who attend school consistently are more likely to achieve academically, and you know the research, graduate high school, succeed in a college experience if they've gone on to post-secondary. And we know that last spring, the pandemic and other factors compounded the challenges our students already faced. And whether coming to classrooms in physical school buildings, connecting through distance learning, or through a hybrid of both, our Minnesota students will now enter a school year transformed and likely traumatized by their months of pandemic isolation, surges in unemployment in their community or maybe in their homes, economic uncertainty, and the racial justice movement that was ignited by the murder of George Floyd while in police custody. So when students are absent, it's not that they are missing school because they don't care or they don't want to learn. Their absence is a signal. It's a message to us that tells our schools, our educators, and our school support staff that we need to reach out to those students and find out what support they need to get back into a classroom, even in a distance learning setting. It's also a signal to all of us that we must reach out on a systemic level to find the root causes, to remove the barriers, to provide the services and supports all of our students need to attend school and to learn. There are actually promising practices across the state of Minnesota. And one of the commitments I have made is to sharing and expanding these practices when I find them. A few examples I can give you this morning that I have noticed and that the research tells us, the evidence that we've gathered tell us are promising practices to increasing attendance and engagement include first, full service community schools, where they organize the services and supports that remove those barriers by first conducting a community needs survey, finding out what the students in their school community need, and then building out the wraparound supports, including those supports that address truancy for families and for students at the school. There are also evidence-based relationship building programs across Minnesota, such as Building Assets Reducing Risks or the BAR Center work. The Building Assets Reducing Work program works to improve student attendance and performance. It has been particularly successful in some of the high schools where I have learned about it, not just improving attendance, but in improving credit attainment and other measures that strengthen a student's path to a high school diploma. I also, in working with the Office of American Indian Education at the Minnesota Department of Education, the advice that comes from our director, Dr. Jane Harstead, regularly as we think through how to meet the needs of Native American students in our buildings, that the single most important practice schools can include is to utilize their Indian education staff in building positive student and family relationships within the school or district. Building trust is an important foundation to provide any attendance program, and building from that foundation into the programming that then we do. Finally, the strongest teaching and learning conditions meet the academic needs of students and the social emotional needs of students, and do so in a safe and welcoming environment. That is a key to preventing truancy as well, because it is a key to fostering engagement. That yes, we have to meet the academic needs of students, and we have to meet the social emotional needs of students. Those things rely on each other, and we have to do so in a safe and welcoming environment. Creating that space where taking risks is okay, taking risks is safe, and who a student is even safer. And I would be remiss if I did not address attendance and engagement specifically during the pandemic. It was critically important to me last spring as we moved from brick and mortar to distance learning, to stress to our educators across the state that attendance needs to go from its traditional role as accountability and efficiency, right? Where it's a very quick thing you do at the beginning of class, you very efficiently send it to the office, and then the office sort of takes it from there at first. It needs to go from that traditional role of accountability and efficiency to connection and relationship building. Every Zoom meeting I was in with educators, at least one teacher broke down crying when they discussed not being able to connect with a student. I found in listening to educators, listening to some of these promising programs I talked about, schools with the greatest success in connecting with students, in engaging with students, either had one of the above programs developed before COVID-19 and the pandemic hit, or they took an all hands on deck approach during distance learning to connecting with students, tapping into the talents and relationships of teachers, paraprofessionals, school-based administrators, community groups, and even students themselves using social media. It was all hands on deck. Those schools had the most success, not just connecting, but engaging with students. It's made me realize, and I think it's made a lot of educators realize, that once we beat this pandemic, we should never let go of the all-out collaboration to look out for our students, our efforts to connect with them, our efforts to engage with them, meet their needs, and teach them. So thank you so much for the time this morning. I look forward to all the ways I can partner with all of you, that we and our expertise of my colleagues at the Department of Education can support the expertise you have in your work, and we can come together to, again, connect and engage with students, meet their needs, and teach them. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you very much, Commissioner. I really appreciate you being with us today and sharing all of that with us. And again, if folks are interested in some of the items that the Commissioner was talking about, we can get some information and send some things out as a follow-up as well. We're going to move to our next presenter, Lynne Penke, who is Hennepin County, leads Hennepin County's work in youth education within Health and Human Services, and really bridges between the County Attorney's Office and Health and Human Services. And so I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Lynne. Lynne, you can introduce yourself a little bit, and then we can move forward. And I see you're setting up your presentation. So, Lynne?
Hello, can you hear me? Can you hear me okay?
Yep, good connection.
Okay, Fantastic. Let's hope we keep that connection. It was a little bit spotty as I was listening to the commissioner, and I thought, oh man, if that's on my end, the timing is going to be terrible. So if we get lost at any time, let me know, or if there's any sort of a lapse. I'm Lynne Penke. Thank you for having me. Thank you for inviting me. Super excited to be here this morning and talk about some of the fantastic work and partnerships that we have within and across Hennepin County and externally with our partners at the schools, nonprofits, foundations, community agencies, and the state. I can't thank you enough. I see a lot of names of folks here who I've actively worked with or we've partnered with, and it's a delight and a pleasure to be here. So let's start with the agenda, and this is super casual, conversational. Please, I'll try to stay with my talking points and not get too down in the weeds or excited about anything. I'm passionate about the work, but jump in at any time with questions or if you want to hear more about something. The real, simple agenda this morning is talking about youth education, which is our team and where we sit within Hennepin County, what we do, what our role is, and then we'll talk about what the youth education teams and Hennepin County's response was to COVID-19 in the spring, the end of the school year, and then how it's going to look different in the fall. Some of the things will stay the same, and other areas, particularly in our disparities reduction efforts, where we're really putting money and resources and focus and making sure that those disparities that we know are there do not get exacerbated as a result of COVID-19. So a little bit about me as I talk about youth education. So I am a Head Start kid. I was a Head Start kid first, and then I got my education in the public school system in very rural Minnesota. I became a teacher myself. I taught in South America for a number of years, and when I came back and landed in social services, I really fell in love with that mission. I have worked for Hennepin County for over 20 years now, and in those 20 years I've worked across 5 different departments, and I've built a lot of relationships, and those relationships really have come to serve me well in this work, and leveraging those relationships as we try to build a network and an infrastructure in supporting youth involved in county systems when it comes to their education. So this picture, which is super high level, we call this our framework, our youth education framework. And the age-old question that many have asked, and we ask ourselves, people who've been doing this work here at Hennepin County longer than I have, what is our role in education? Where do we fit? And this framework really is that umbrella that encompasses all of the work that happens in education of youth across the many departments in Hennepin County. And I think of it, the metaphor of an accordion is one that I use frequently. It stretches and it folds. And when it contracts and folds inward, that center of focus for us are the youth involved in non-voluntary services at Hennepin County, whether that is child welfare, juvenile probation, in some cases be at school, truancy. We include those non-voluntary services in that definition. And on any given day in Hennepin County, that's somewhere between 3,600 and 3,800 kids. But my colleagues at the library or in public health or in other departments at Hennepin County will say, we serve all kids. So then that accordion really stretches. And within that model, we look at what programs and services and efforts do we have to support all kids in Hennepin County. So keeping that in mind and how our infrastructure and our processes and our supports that we have may stretch or fold depending on what we're looking at and what we're focused on. We've got 5 buckets that we are focused on, and none of them are too surprising or will surprise anyone on this call. We want kids ready for kindergarten. We want educational stability in that K through 12 experience, and that is where the Every Student Succeeds Act, as we call it, ESSA, really our work is grounded in that. That third, that blue bucket, is we want an integrated education community. And what does that mean? That means as we're playing our part, our role in supporting education for children involved in Hennepin County's services, we want to make sure we are partnering with everyone else, including parents, families, community, and youth. We have folks on our team who work with transition age youth or youth who are exiting foster care. We want their voice as well. So we've got a lot of efforts in that blue box around building and really intentionally developing integrated education community through those partnerships. We want our youth college and career ready. And then the last one, that gray one, which we almost separated out a little bit in this visual because it is an underpinning of all the work and it really spreads across all of those buckets, is our number one priority around reducing racial disparities in education outcomes for all youth. And I'll talk more about how we are focusing even more on that and really dedicating so many resources during COVID to making sure that those disparities don't get worse. Any questions at this point in the chat, Nora? Can we go back for just a moment? A couple more things I want to say about this framework. This framework.
I haven't seen any questions.
Okay, great, thank you. So again, our overarching goal within this framework is that alignment. Internally across Hennepin County, many people working in an education-related role in that work, in partnership with schools, with families, communities. We want that alignment internally and then externally as well. How can we do better at coordinating, at collaborating? This model was created by those of us at Hennepin County who sit at what we call our education table across all of those different departments: early childhood folks, workforce development folks, our transition age youth coordinator, everyone coming together to say, how do we do this work together? Okay, next slide. So the 2 areas where the youth education team, the team that I'm part of, focuses really the most of our time is around what was that second bucket and the third one's educational stability and integrated education community. And what does that look like practically and tactically day to day? You know, I am so pleased that there are so many people on this call who are part of some of those groups and networks that we've set up and figured out how to build the structures and the infrastructures around relationships so that we've got them standing. With the ESSA work, which is around educational stability, we have what are called ESSA convenings a couple times a year, where we invite every single point of contact for ESSA for every school in Hennepin County, as well as surrounding school districts in other counties where our youth and out-of-home placement might be. We bring them to the table. This fall, it'll be a virtual table. But we bring them to the table, and then we've also got our colleagues in child welfare, in Be at School, in early childhood at the table as well. And we talk through what are the tools and templates that we need from each other, what is the documentation, what are the communication protocols that we need to ensure that we're making those best interest determination, that we are reducing the number of days of educational instability that can happen as a result of a change in placement for a child. That's one where in all of these, it's been tremendously helpful, successful to bring people together and just talk about our work. The education system is huge and complex, whether it's special ed law or the work that student support specialists do, 504s and IEPs and so many other things, school-based mental health. And then the work that we have at the county, at Hennepin County, and our system is just massive. Trying to navigate and figure out how to coordinate those services can be daunting and really frustrated. So in all of these groups, we've figured out how to build intentionality and structure into relationships and learn more about each other's work, which I think, I certainly hope many would agree, we've been quite successful at doing that. Another example of that is our county school consultation group with a couple of the bigger school districts. We have, there was a consensus that there are systemic barriers and barriers in our systems that it just becomes really difficult to coordinate service. And so once a month, we have different folks cross-functionally from those schools and different staff cross-functionally from Hennepin County come together, and perhaps it is a deep dive consultation on one individual child, and using that, figuring out where are we stuck, how can we get creative, what interventions have been tried and what could be tried to really help with the educational engagement and success for this kiddo. And then through that, really looking at what are our systems barriers and where are we getting stuck. So that group meets monthly, and depending on who's at the table or what the nature of the consult is, we can bring in anyone from the county attorney's office to juvenile probation to children's mental health. I've talked about our transition-aged youth coordinator. We have services through contracted agencies. We'll bring them in as well. And then it can be a third grade teacher, a school social worker, guidance counselor, assistant principal, whoever the people are who really are in the best position to coordinate and really partner with us in how can we work together on this. Our county school communication group works at a bit different level, because that's the other thing. All of these structures and these partnerships, we've really worked hard to make sure that they are at all levels of the organization. So on the one hand, we've got regular standing commissioners and superintendents meeting that happen a couple of times a year. And on the other end, we've got, hey, we've got to, get on a phone call and grab that school social worker and that caseworker at Hennepin County, along with that classroom teacher, and really coordinate and figure out what's going on with an individual kiddo and parent as well. The county school communication group sits more at a middle level. That is a group that we've pulled together that includes a lot of communications director, after school programming, special ed directors, and then our staff, those manager level at Hennepin County, where we come together and we've brainstormed historically, where are the issues where we really struggle with understanding each other's systems, where can we build training opportunities together. We want to know more about social emotional learning, or we want to offer more around trauma informed or trauma responsive, culturally responsive service delivery. So whether it is planning that through that communication group and then executing it and really making sure that we've got blended participants there and we're sitting together in those trainings and learning from each other has been really valuable. Surrogate parent is the one that I still feel so overwhelmed by, trying to understand the intricacies of that. And so we pull together those subject matter experts and really work in coordination on that. And then
Lynn, this is Tracy. Nancy put a question into the chat just wanting to know about the makeup of these groups. And I think that you addressed it kind of as she was typing it, but Nancy, I want to give you a chance to unmute and jump in if just before Lynn moves on, is there a follow-up or anything further you'd like to know in terms of who's part of these groups?
Yeah, I've never heard of any of this. I've been a social worker for, I don't know, 15 years, never heard of any of it. So I'm just wondering, you know, if people want to be involved, is that appropriate? If so, how are you involved? I'm trying to tie it to my world a little bit more, I guess.
Sure, absolutely. And my contact information will be here, and I would be delighted to have anyone and everyone reach out to get engaged in these. So first, and I'll talk a little bit about how things shifted during COVID. So a lot of these, which were work groups, you know, there might be one formal representative from a school, or there might be one person who's a subject matter expert from another school. To have 23 independent school districts and 50 charters at the table doesn't necessarily make a work group, you know, so it's, again, that stretching and folding depending on what it is. But as we moved into COVID, and it was, whoa, we need to get more voices, we've got to be able to disseminate information faster and quicker, things shifted. And I'll talk about that in just a moment. The last thing I want to talk about on here are partnership consultations, and that is new territory. We're just figuring out and working, and it's very exciting. We've got a lot of tools in our toolkit as a child welfare agency, whether it is family group conferencing or a tool called Safe and Connected, different tools we use to really look at strengths-based approach, deep dive consultation, and you know, figuring out what are the right interventions, not just for a child around education, but that whole family. And partnership consultations is our starting to work, again, with school partners and with families to say, what if we do this together in coordination? What would it look like for you, parent, to see us as your support team? And where there is, you know, opportunities with a child who might be struggling with educational stability or educational engagement, what can it look like where we come together? And those, we've done a few of those, and it's been really successful, and has helped break down some of those barriers in terms of what services might be provided at school, what interventions is Hennepin County trying, and how do we bridge those and really provide that transparency and understanding and clarity and partnership for parents and families, and empower them in that coordination of services. All right, next slide. So all of that, you know, chatting, that rambling that I did about all these different groups and partnerships and ways that we have been able to stand up and build focused, intentional structure around the partnerships, it all paid off when COVID hit, because we knew who the people were, we knew how we interacted with them, we knew what relationships we had, and we were able to really lean on those quickly. The first thing we did is we took all of those different distribution lists at all levels, all functions across all of our organizations, both county and school, and we said, let's just open up a Zoom call on a house Thursday morning, 8 a.m. Everyone's at home, jump on, and let's just get our heads together. Let's talk about where we're at, if we've figured out any answers yet, what we're planning, what we know, what we don't know, the things we're most worried about. We did that once a week for the first few weeks, and it was just a very informal round robin of, oh my gosh, we've got to, you know, we need to know what the food supports are. We need to know what our, like, figuring out what the gaps were, and then our team moving really fast to try and pull those together and pull it together and then spit it back out to folks. Collecting resources across all of Hennepin County that we could then share with our staff at Hennepin County and school partners. Well, those partnership calls, which, by the way, I think we're close to 500 people on the email list to those who can jump on the call at any time. They started to evolve in ways that were just so meaningful. We started to hear really what the needs were. We don't know. What we heard from so many of our school partners was, we don't know what child welfare is doing right now or how they're working with families during this pandemic. Are they going out to homes? How often are they checking in with families? And the converse happened as well. Our staff wondering, how are school social workers finding families that they haven't been able to identify, or how are they engaging folks where connectivity might be an issue, they might be homeless and highly mobile. And so we started to build those calls based on what the themes were. And I would say that over the course of 8 weeks, we probably did 8. We turned those partnership calls into webinars. We had one that was all about housing, and we pulled in the different folks working with shelter and what grant opportunities, what does the housing landscape look like right now during COVID. The one that I think had the best attendance and the most people call in for was Ask a School Social Worker. And that one, I still get a smile and feel so good about the connections and relationships that were made there. We had 5 or 6 school social workers, a nice diversity across size of district and geographic area, a couple who were elementary, a couple that were high school, a middle school. And we had them talk about how are they working right now? What tips and tricks can they share? What's working in engaging kids? And what was fascinating, we did one all about school-based mental health. And that one, I remember, it was fascinating because one school-based mental health worker at one school had already started putting together a Google Doc of different resources and links. And another school-based mental health worker at another school said, "Ooh, can you share that with us? Because we can just add to yours." And so those structures allowed for new opportunities to really share resources and connect in ways that might not have been there before, and certainly were a struggle when everyone was scrambling as the pandemic unfolded. We had one called Ask a Probation Officer. We did one that was about Be at School. We had a few that were scheduled that had to be canceled because of the way the spring unfolded. And we intend to continue with those now in the fall. As school kicks off, we'll get those going. We sent out a survey to the folks who were on those calls last year saying, what was helpful about them? What do you want us to focus on this year? And so we'll probably do every other one. We'll find the right frequency, the right timing, the right subject, and some of them will just be open calls, jump on the call. I happen to have in my network of contacts a teacher who was a Teacher of the Year a few years ago and has a huge social media presence. And I asked him if he would just tweet out to his network on Twitter, what sorts of tips and tricks might people have, and if they want to jump on this call to share. And we got some new folks added to that distribution list that would certainly not have been in our traditional networks. That was really fun as well. All of those other standard meetings, those communication groups and the consultation groups that I talked about, those shifted, and we were able to shift them really quickly. What was a standing meeting at a physical location downtown on the first Monday of every month turned into a, hey, let's pick up Wednesday and Friday, 8 a.m. We'll jump on for a quick 15-minute call. In some ways, it was quite liberating because rather than finding a time when everyone could drive to a physical location and make the cut, virtual has enabled a lot of us to just very quickly jump on, see each other, talk through what we need, troubleshoot something, and get those results. The resource sharing and information that happened during that time, oh man, I think some of the folks on my team would, you know, probably still are reeling from the work that was involved with collecting and collating and trying to get a handle on those resources, keeping it live and up to date, and then trying to spit that back out to folks so that it was usable. It was a labor of love, and we're still figuring out. We know that resources for the fall will have shifted, and still figuring out what will be helpful to folks, what sort of resources do they have that they want to share, and we can be the hub amongst those spokes. And then the last thing around devices, we knew from everyone in this partnership, our folks across Hennepin County internally to our agency, and from our school partners, that there were kids who had gaps. We knew that the schools were moving as fast as they could and frantically trying to get devices and hotspots into the hands of kids who could not access distance learning. And we also, it's not lost on me, probably not lost on any of us, that the same kids that were the hardest to locate, to get that device to them, are the ones who experience the greatest disparities, right? Whether it's a language barrier, or they are homeless and highly mobile, or whatever the issue is that was prohibiting contact and delivery of a device. And so we were able, through our staff, because our staff are interacting with these families regularly, we were able to pretty quickly coordinate and identify, you know, who are the kids involved in county services who don't have a device, and let's get hustling on that. And so we became a little mini IT shop very quickly, and started working really quickly in coordination with our school partners and families to get those devices out. We also got a grant from one of our foundations here in the community, which allowed us to put devices into the shelters, so that if a child has to spend time in shelter, they are able to access school right away. Those days of waiting for transportation to get them back to their school of origin and all of that, I'm really excited about the potential. No matter what happens with back to school, no child should have to miss any school for that lack of connectivity. All right, I'll keep moving. So now switching gears and looking towards the fall, what's going to change? So the work that I just talked about, that the youth education team supports internally and externally, really won't change much. But what's really exciting is that through the CARES money that Hennepin County is receiving, and some of the board action requests that we have appropriated some of that money to supporting distance learning and education, that is going to look and hopefully feel different in the fall. Disparities reduction, I'll take a step back for those of you who are not in Hennepin County. The county has been focused a very concerted effort on reducing disparities, some of the worst racial disparities in the nation. This has been a multi-year effort. And this, what we call the gears diagram, really shows how the different domains of where our residents may experience disparities are connected. And, you know, just like in any sort of machinery, you turn one gear and the rest will turn as well. You get some gravel in the gears, they're all going to get jammed up and nothing's going to turn. It's not a mistake, or it's not an accident that education is first. We know that education is that gear that turns the rest and really impacts well-being for all of our residents. So within that, we have at Hennepin County created a disparities reduction line of business. We have an assistant county administrator, Chester Cooper, who oversees that line of business with dedicated resources and dedicated resources focused on reducing disparities in education. What that means for the fall is that you can go to the next slide, Nora. Thank you. What that means for the fall is that CARES dollars have been dedicated to the support of distance learning. And that that will show up in two different ways. One, the continuation of devices and connectivity for our families that are involved in county services, and working in close coordination with the schools to fill those gaps wherever they may be. And the other thing that is super exciting is we are actively, my colleague Krista Mims, whose name is on this slide, she is actively, she was not able to co-present with me today because she is actively hiring around 15 education support specialists. And they will work one-on-one with students involved in county services to really support that whole family in overcoming whatever challenges there may be to distance learning. It's that support outside of school that can assess what the barriers are, provide or connect to community services. I think in a lot of cases it's going to be, and we did a little mini pilot in the spring using some of our library staff, and you know, what would it look like to support some of our students? A lot of it's with executive functioning stuff. So, oh my gosh, I got an email from my teacher and I'm overwhelmed. I don't know how to schedule my distance learning day. So a lot of coaching and support on that, and teaching some advocacy and other self skills so that kids and families really feel empowered during this time. More to come on that. We're super excited that the staff who are being hired into this have experience in education, experience in social services. They are experienced in their community. They know their communities, and we've got some who speak another language and who are experts in cultural competency within their communities. With that, I'll take questions.
People can unmute, and I know sometimes it's a free-for-all and people talk over each other, but let's start by seeing if there's a few questions, and otherwise people can start it in a chat, and then we can, if it gets too difficult, we can just call on people and rotate through.
Hey Lynn, this is Lori Whittier.
Hi, Lori.
Hi, I had a quick question about the education support specialists. Is there a plan as far as are they going to be working with certain school districts or certain areas within the county, or how would we know, kind of who to reach out to, I guess?
Yeah, great question. And I think we are still figuring that out actively. Part of it depends on, I think of like the war boards that teachers are putting together right now to figure out which kids are going to go in which classroom and what criteria puts them. I think that Krista is going to be going through some of those same efforts, and really figuring out who connects where. So I can't share more than it's actively being figured out right now.
Lynn, we have a question from Jessica Thule. I am a school social worker. If I would like to request assistance for a student through a support specialist, do I email Krista?
I think at this point you could email Krista to ask if that is going to be a way that the education support specialist can be accessed, and she'll be able to answer that, because those details, we're still figuring it out.
And another question, do you have a web link where these programs are described?
Well, that's a great question. So it depends what program you're referring to. So all of the groups and networks and partnerships that I've been talking about are really organic, and they're not owned by anyone. So our team, the youth education team, really provides that infrastructure and supports it. but we're not the ones who are actually administering the programs. In terms of the programs, those would sit within each of the different departments. I'm not sure if that's what your question was. When it comes to the webinars and the partnership calls and those things that we're going to be actively using to connect and partner as we move into the fall, anyone who's on that email list will get a flyer and a schedule and a coordination, a calendar of when they are scheduled and what they will be. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
We'll see if she circles back. Could you, Nicole, could you just kind of introduce your question? Nicole was asking about impending evictions.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
Yeah.
can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
I am greatly concerned about the impact of the impending evictions that are coming at the end of the eviction moratorium, particularly for families in urban areas where there's such a high concentration of renters. We know that as soon as the moratorium is up, our housing courts are going to be flooded with evictions, and the consequent housing instability and homelessness is inevitably going to result in education instability as well. What are we doing in Hennepin County to address this wave of evictions that is right around the corner?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know. I think you probably represent everyone on this call and their biggest concern. Something that we know, going back to that picture of the gears, is that without housing, it's hard to have educational stability. That is a webinar topic that we are absolutely, it's going to be one of the first ones we do this fall, because it's on the minds of every school social worker, and we will have some of the folks working in the housing area coming to talk about what things look like for the fall, and I'll make sure that we get that information out. Okay, I'm looking at how do we get on the email list to be notified about the upcoming webinars. You can email me, we'll get you added to the list, absolutely. I'm looking at the comment from Amanda. I work for an online school. So school as we know it is not changing much, but our enrollment numbers have increased for this year. In the spring, we stopped making. Is this something that is still on hold, or should we be making referrals since school hasn't necessarily changed much for us online? That's a be at school question. Lori, are you still on the phone?
I am. I'm so sorry. I was dealing with something else. Could I hear the question again?
I'm reading it in the chat. It's around making truancy referrals due to COVID-19. Will this still be on hold, or should we be making referrals since school hasn't necessarily changed much for those of us who are online schools?
We are going to be taking the COVID referrals as we were in the spring. So we want to try to do an early intervention as best we can. And the hope is that we can help identify what the issue is or the barrier is and grab it quickly and resolve the issue for the family. If anyone else from the Be at School team wants to jump in to give a more complete response, please feel free to do so.
You know, Lori, since you're there, there's also been a couple comments in here in terms of asking for suggestions regarding court action. Kelly was one person wondering about that, and I think earlier in the chat somebody else had been asking about that as well. I'm not quite sure there's enough context in the question. Kelly, do you want to jump on and give some context so Lori can help answer your question?
Sure. So we currently have a number of cases that remain in court prior to COVID-19. And then our program is structured to continue allowing petitions. I know some places aren't so. So I'm just wondering how we can better serve our families when they are engaged with court during this COVID-19 time.
So that's a really hard question. One of the things that we've struggled with in Hennepin County over the years is how to find a way for a court intervention to be effective. And we've really tried to look at alternatives to court intervention for truancy kids because we've struggled with it. So, you know, I think it's really important for groups to think outside of the box when it comes to engagement with older students and trying to, as best you can, figure out what the needs are and figure out how to support the student and the family. But you know, we will still be using court on a very limited way. We've really tried to avoid bringing any children or youth into court for any reason during the pandemic. So I think that's something to consider too. But I don't know, again, if anyone else from the team wants to jump in, you know, please do so.
Yeah, this is Kim Momaday. I also work on the Be It School team for the county attorney's office. And I just wanted to say that if you have students that are already in the juvenile court system and you have questions about those cases, you know, you can reach out to us, and you know, we can look into it. I'm not sure what you know, what stage those cases are in without knowing, but we don't want to get into the specifics of the individuals here. But you know, feel free to reach out to us, and we can look into those individual cases and you know, discuss with you what's going on, if that's helpful.
Hi, I just had a quick question. Is it okay to ask? Can you hear me?
Yes, please.
Oh,
Yep,
okay.
go ahead.
One is for scholars who, you know, don't have proper transportation. I know they get transportation to and from school, but in those emergency situations, as far as getting sick and things like that, is there any provisions, you know, like an emergency line, you know, so that there's some type of transportation given to our scholars with that?
So I think that is a question for me you're asking, and that is a tricky one too. So if it is a child who is in out-of-home placement or foster care, that would absolutely be a conversation we would actively want to have and make sure that transportation is happening for that scholar. If it is a child who is involved in county services, not in out-of-home placement, that would be more of that gray area, and where I would love to hear more and see how we can put our heads together and solve for that. So give me, feel free to email me.
Okay, thank you. I just also had a quick question. As I'm trying to prepare for like lunches, and right now we're in a hybrid model, A/B, and if they're on an A day, just provisions about lunches for that next day because they don't have that transportation. I know transportation in our district is providing like a for just those who are on solely online, they're able to give them like a week's worth of food. But if they're doing the hybrid model, they don't have that provision. They're still having students come to the building, put in their code and all of that sort of thing. Do you know any more information about how we can ensure that they're getting nutrition during this?
So that, going back to all of the lists that we compiled last spring, and we'll be working on that and updating those now. I am hopeful that within a few weeks' time, we'll have an initial draft of a list that we can send out and really disseminate to everyone to say, these are the food supports in your district or in your community that we know of. It certainly won't be an exhaustive list. And those lists are only as comprehensive as they are the people who put into them. It's like, you know, it's almost like a community of practice. As you are looking at the list or as you are learning, school social workers have more resources in their quiver than anybody else. Let us know. The amazing Casey Schmig on our youth education team went to every website for every school district in Hennepin County and looked to see what's the child care situation, what's the after school care situation, what is the food support situation. We start from there and then we just add on, and we'll make sure to get that out as quickly as we can as people are getting ready for the first day of school.
Thank you.
Tracy, is that it for questions?
Sorry, I was like, you know, you'd think after months and months of all this Zoom, we'd get very adept at finding our unmute button, and it still eludes me all the time. I want to take a chance to, again, just thank everybody for attending. I know people are logging off and going to other things as they need to, but a quick thank you for all the attendees for participating, Lynn for speaking, and the commissioner, I think, maybe has logged off at this point, but also to our partners at Hennepin County Attorney's Office. It is a truly great partnership that we've been able to continue to do this year after year, and I know participants talk about it and really appreciate it, so thank you for that partnership. And to Nora, who supported our technology on all 3 of these webinars and really kind of kept us afloat. So again, we will continue to scroll through the chat, and we will take a record of this and be able to follow up as an email with participants. So thank you again, Lynn and everybody else, and have a wonderful rest of your day.